Hello, everyone. People just coming in. Say who you are in the chat and introduce yourself. Let me just share my screen, get ourselves sorted for this session. I think I can see that we're recording. So yeah, do put your name in the chat. I need to allow, as you'll, I'm sure, be very aware if you've been in other sessions today or yesterday even, it takes a little while to get everyone in, just a couple of minutes. So let's make use of the time and say who we are. Say if the sun's shining where you are, say what you've been up to before, what you're planning afterwards. Tell me the names of your pets. I don't know, what anything you feel like. And apologies if you've been in my other two sessions, in my session earlier or my session yesterday, because I do the same. I do say the same things in this warm-up bit. Just feel very welcome, and I do really hope that you're having a fabulous weekend. There are such a lot of excellent sessions on, and isn't it a great job that we can get some of them on, well, get all of them on catch up, the ones that we can't be at, because I know I'm very much looking forward to doing that later on as well. Such a brilliant event. So yeah, just giving people a little bit of time to come in. About another minute or so. People could be coming from different sessions or just getting back in after a walk, just finishing off lunch on a Saturday. Got a few messages in the chat. Oh, sunny everywhere, seems to be. Oh, Janet, AWL Manchester, might I be seeing you soon? Next weekend even, if I'm not getting my dates confused. Wolverhampton, Bushy, Cambridge. Ah, Marie-Odile, you're about to get a mention. And Alison, yeah. So, how are we doing for people? I think we're doing. I think we're doing as well as we need to get started. We've had three minutes, and so I think I'm gonna call time on the welcome bit. And I very much hope that we will have the opportunity for posting some questions at the end of the session. I mean, post them at any time, and then I will pick up the chat at the end and go through questions. There should be time for that. This is a slightly longer session because there's such a lot to say about primary languages. I hope you agree. And so we shouldn't feel as rushed, and I shall keep an eye on the time. Oh, Cologne's not particularly sunny. Oh, what a shame. Lovely, lovely though, and about to get very Christmassy. One of my most favourite experiences was taking Year 8 to the Weihnachtsmarkt in Köln. One of my favourite teaching trip experiences. Okay, so let's get started then. Hopefully you can see the presentation slide, or at least the title of it. If you want to make a note of my contact details, I'm at RachelHawks60 on Twitter. RachelHawks.com is my website, and you can email me through there if you want to be in touch about anything that we're going to talk about this afternoon. If you would like to let me know who you are in the session, then please scan the QR code and leave your details. You can obviously say within that, if you would like to go onto my primary mailing list, then just actually find a place in that Google form to say that, or just email me through the website and say that you would like to. I will make no assumptions. Just by letting me know who you are this afternoon doesn't mean I'm going to be in touch with you unless you want that. But it is nice for me to know who I've talked to today about this really fascinating and important subject. So hello and welcome to the session. I will post a link at the end of it to the slides. So yeah, you don't need to ask about that there, but you could remind me at the end if I haven't done it, if I haven't remembered myself. I've uploaded them to a Google Drive and I can share that link with you. And if you were in my earlier session, because you happen to be secondary as well, I have also now uploaded that session, which I hadn't done previously. So very warm welcome to this session. My name is Rachel Hawkes. I'm currently seconded from my trust where I work in Cambridgeshire, the CAM Academy Trust, to work as co-director of NSELP, which is the National Centre for Excellence for Language Pedagogy. But today I'm going to talk in this session about Key Stage 2 curriculum design. So really focusing on the work of me and others in my trust. And all of the resources that I'm going to share this afternoon in this session are freely available and also freely adaptable because they are in PowerPoint. And the French and Spanish resources continue to be uploaded to my website. German is also available, Key Stage 2, and I'll share the link to that. That's hosted somewhere else. I'll share the links to that during the session. It's really important. I'm keen to get underway, but it is really important to acknowledge that this is a massive team effort. So, well, when I say a massive team effort, it's a massive effort on behalf of a very, very small team. So I want to thank Paula Vázquez Valero, who's my colleague at the CAM Academy Trust. She is lead creator of the Spanish Key Stage 2 resources, and she's also delivering a CPD course for teachers to introduce them to the scheme of work and to upskill their Spanish as well. I also want to thank Mario Di Guillou, who I think is here, which is very exciting, who's working with me on the French curriculum materials, and you'll actually see a little bit of her later. And also to Catherine Monument, who runs the ALL CAMS primary network, works in Cambridgeshire, and is also delivering training for this French scheme of work. So it's really a small team effort and a massive effort on our behalf. I'm also, I mentioned German. I'm working on a Key Stage 2 German scheme of work with colleagues at Reading University. Rowena Kasprovic is leading that team. She's leading a primary languages research project, which is going to look at primary learning outcomes from the 4 years of teaching in classes that are following these schemes of work, as well as others in French, German, and Spanish. So that's, I think, all my thank yous. Let's get started on the actual session. So I've called this Teaching MFL to Beginner Learners, Culture, Creativity, Communication, Phonics, Vocabulary, Grammar. Let's have it all. And I think we can. Let's see if we can. Let's see if you agree with me. First of all, I just want to lay out, some people may know that there are other Key Stage 2 curricula on my website. Some of you might even have used them or adapted them or whatever, been aware of them anyway. And those French and Spanish curricula needed some changes. And so what's arisen out of that is this team working on what we have now. And I want to explain those changes because I think it's important for anybody who's evaluating what they're doing in light of how things move on and how things develop over time would probably benefit from just knowing the sorts of thinking and decisions that have gone into this. So when we experience a push for change, so the main drivers for change of any kind are usually solving problems, existing problems that we have, or suddenly problems that arise, and seizing opportunities. And those two drivers were our impetus for change and for creating these new curricula. So on the problem side, we had some thorny issues. We needed to have a curriculum structure that works for mixed age classes 3, 4 and 5, 6 because of some of the size of primary schools in our trust. We'd always fudged that issue for them, and our existing curriculum that went very much in a linear fashion, 3, 4, 5, 6, was having to be sort of heavily adapted on the hoof by those teachers. We had a Key Stage 2 Spanish curriculum that was written in 2006. So we knew that it was in need of some review. We had even more of a mix in terms of teacher expertise across our trust and partner primary schools than we have ever had. And so this part of why we rewrote things is about leveling up learner experiences. We wanted to ensure that no matter the experience of the teacher, the expertise or the confidence level of the teacher in their language, the learners in our classrooms across trust and across our feeders, because we work with those too, would be equal and would be on a level playing field. So in addition to that, and that explains those three things, in addition to that, for another reason for reviewing came from the fact that the existing Key Stage 2 programme of study, so the national curriculum, had very little detail in it. So it's a great document, and I don't disagree with anything in it. It just hasn't got enough in it, in my view. It needs clearer definition of the content and clearer thinking about the sequencing to help us get the best curriculum we can. So we, as all schools and as all teachers have had to do, we've defined our own content, and we did it back then, but we know a lot more now about how to construct curricula. So we'll come back to the thinking that went into that, but that was essentially the need to put more meat on the bones of the national curriculum. And then on the seizing the opportunities front, the current Ofsted framework, not new anymore, although it still feels a little bit new because of all the downtime and the lost time due to COVID, but it's substantially different from the last one. It does demand much more clarity about what we are teaching, and more importantly, it's more exacting about how well learners are remembering what we're teaching. So in an inspection at one of my trust schools, we asked them to look at French. We requested a deep dive in French, and there were some real positives that came out of that, and they were using the new Key Stage 2 curriculum that we wrote in 2018-19. So not this new one, but the other new one for French. But the two main areas that came out for development were, one, teacher expertise, knowledge and confidence, and two, the level of challenge. They felt that there was too much content in it overall. And I agreed with them. And that's part of the need that we experienced to review. So all of these things fed into this thinking and this planning. And then we've obviously got the national changes that are now coming to fruition. So the introduction of a defined word list at Key Stage 4 at GCSE is an absolute game changer. So it offers the best and possibly unique opportunity to join up curriculum provision, Key Stage 2, Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4, and affect transition in a way that we have never been able to do to this point. So it's really the time to make sure that every single learning moment counts at Key Stage 2. These language learning hours that we have at Key Stage 2, they're not just an optional extra, they're not a bonus. They are part of the necessary learning from year 3 to year 11 to facilitate 90% of students. So if you teach primary and you've got 30 pupils in front of you, think about every single one of them, bar 3, going on to GCSE. that's a very wide ability range, all of those being able to be successful at Key Stage 4. And now that we know what we're aiming at Key Stage 4, much more clearly in terms of defined knowledge, it makes sense to start that learning as early as possible and to join up the content. So all of that, a big melting pot of problems and opportunities pushed us into the change. And then whenever you do any sort of major change work, you've got to be, you anticipate that some people will want to get alongside and learn from the journey and take messages on and then develop their own journeys from that. So it's really important to be clear about the assumptions that you make and the principles that you put in place when you do something like that. So when you engage in curriculum design, we have set out a clear set of principles that reflect the reality of what we've experienced in the teaching circumstances. So these are the principles that have guided us in the scheme of work. We are accepting that language input and learning opportunities are time limited, not just at Key Stage 2, at Key Stage 3 and at Key Stage 4. Any learning opportunities for languages, when we know how long it takes to learn and get competent and get confident in a language, are going to be time limited, unless you've got oodles of input in the outside world, which we know that our learners tend not to have. So in those circumstances, we set out and we believe that most learning is going to be intentional rather than incidental, and that it will be helpful for our learners to set out very informed, achievable expectations about curriculum content, so that rather than in any way, shape or form try to emulate an immersion environment, which we can't because we haven't got enough time. By the age of 4, if you are learning your mother tongue, you've had 17,000 hours of input by the age of 4. If we were going to replicate that sort of level of input, it would take 189 years to get there, to get to the same level of hours input. And we only have obviously the 9 years, and that's if we join up properly. So that they're not comparable. So we need to think about this as classroom learning, as a subject, in the same way as you might go about planning to join up maths teaching from Key Stage 3 to 3 to 4, because it's part of a journey of learning about mathematical concepts. Similarly with languages. So we set out that careful planning and sequencing and revisiting is needed if this substantial progress, in inverted commas, that's from the national curriculum, substantial progress in one language is expected. That's an expected outcome. And we need to define what that looks like as well, because substantial progress could mean different things to different people, to different groups. Explicit learning is helpful. This is the second principle, because it levels up opportunity for less naturally analytical learners. So we know that language proficiency is related to analytical ability, linguistic analytical ability. But the best thing of all is that you can influence and improve that linguistic analytical ability by explicit teaching. So we don't need to just sort of look at our learners and say, oh, well, look, they can just see links where no one else can, and isn't that amazing? Aren't they naturally gifted? Yes, they are, but we can help close the gap between those that are innately, naturally, linguistically, analytically gifted and those that aren't by our explicit teaching. And that leveling of the playing field needs to start as early as language learning starts. Otherwise, if we started in year 7, but they've had 4 years without any of it, they will be in a very gapped position. There will be a great gulf between the learners who've really just perceived those patterns and those that haven't had any benefit from them whatsoever. So that felt really important to us to take on board as a principle. And we felt, why not? Because conceptual learning is in full swing. in literacy and numeracy by year 3. Those concepts, those grammatical concepts are being taught explicitly to pupils in English. They can therefore be linked, and we'll come back to that later about how important it can be to link up the Key Stage 2 grammatical teaching in English with that in the target language or in the new language. Not a principle to enjoy language for its own sake, to accept, recognize, celebrate the fact that language in itself generates fascination and enjoyment, and the sounds, so be it the sounds of the language, rhymes, be it words in and of themselves, whether it's patterns, those are fascinating things for study in their own right. And I think sometimes we shy away from the actual language and we try and gloss around it with interesting cultural concepts, as though that's the only bit that's interesting, and the language in and of itself isn't fascinating too. And I think that isn't my experience. I think that culture is absolutely important, and we will get there too, but I don't want to minimize the interest, the intrinsic interest and fascination that comes from the words and the sounds and the patterns themselves, because I absolutely believe that is there, and that year 3 and 4, 5 and 6 is the time to engage learners with it, if not earlier. Language learning is obviously all about communication. Whatever we talk about getting into those sort of core knowledge strands or pillars, as Ofsted loves to call them, of the phonics, of the vocab, of the grammar, those aren't ends in and of themselves. They are going somewhere, and where they're going is towards confident communication. So you can't spontaneously come out with a load of language unless you know the sounds and some words and some patterns of the language. It just won't happen. So it is an obvious just stating the case, but I think it's important to always be thinking about, you know, what pupils are going to do with these 3 things when they have them all as batches of knowledge. What are they going to do with them? And always having opportunities for them to do something with them is going to be important. Culture, almost goes without saying, is as interesting and important to primary age learners as it is to language learners of any age. There is no age limit on the interest that we have in learning about other peoples, other places, other customs. So we obviously need to have that going on as much as we can in our primary curriculum, and making a principle that creativity is not just about bringing together arts into language learning. So creativity, sometimes it's like when we say meaningful practice, we think that means something different from what it actually means. Creativity to us in this scheme of work is putting language together independently, is being able to manipulate the language. And that could be to write your own poem, but it doesn't have to be in the writing of a poem that you show your creativity. So sometimes it's about just seeing creativity as a bit broader than producing a song or a picture or a poem or a performance of some kind. And those things are all really good, but it's about broadening the definition of creativity. Okay. And then an extra thing. So we started with those key principles and propositions, and obviously we started sharing our work as soon as we could. It's been online for a while now. And one school that's in Leeds teaching this scheme of work we had some correspondence with the teacher about their primary languages policy. And she sent me some wording, so I sent her ours. And she sent me this back, which I was absolutely taken with. So this notion of not just the fascination for words and all of those things that was in there, but the bit that she's added for me, which I just found brilliant, was a key focus in making friends. And we refer to friendship sentences in our teaching. And I just thought, what a lovely hook for this age group when we think about When we think about what language learning is really all about, it's making connections with people, and it's about opening our pupils' minds to using words to make those connections, and to using different words in different languages to make those connections. I'm just being visited by my cat. So I was really taken by what they said there, and thought what a brilliant way of revisiting language. So every time you want to recap something, and this is a recap slide from term 3 of year 3/4, we use the idea of, so not in every recapping, but sometimes periodically, we use this idea of friendship sentences to revisit some of the language that we've practiced so far. So this is where we sort of introduce what we're revisiting at this point, talking about kindness. You know, some of these things are just about the wider citizenship, the wider sort of being human of language learning. And, you know, often, as I said about creativity before, creativity in language use is about spotting an appropriate moment to use what you know to say something that's good at that moment. So I think it's really, really important that we bring these things back, and that we have nice sort of accessible hooks to hang them on, things that will capture the imagination. I mean, this idea of friendship sentences captured my imagination, so I totally think it's going to capture year 3 and year 4. So these are some of the things that they're revising. These are some of the kind things that they know how to say, and that they know how to say by themselves and manipulate and put individual words together to say. They hadn't necessarily learned those particular things as phrases, but what they know is all of those words and all of those structures individually, so they can make these things for themselves. So again, it's a little bit more about manipulation and creativity, even in the revision phase. We're not just revising set phrases, we're revising words and sentences that they can build for themselves from those individual parts. And I think so much of the early language curriculum can be considered in this way, in this being kind to people, and making connections with people, greeting somebody, asking how they are, saying what you like, asking what somebody else likes, enhancing their self-esteem by pointing out some positive character traits and positive behaviors or moods, or exchanging information about birthdays. It goes on and on. Part of that sort of natural curriculum that we're going to want to have at Key Stage 2 lends itself to this notion of friendship. So I really, really like that and wanted to share that with you. And it's now shared, it's now embedded in our scheme of work, and comes back. So much for principles. Our starting point is obviously going to be the National Curriculum Programme Study. It's got to be the starting point for any Key Stage 2 scheme of work. And it's the knowledge strands, as I keep calling them, because I don't like the word pillars because they're too separate and they're not joined up enough. But the knowledge strands of phonics, vocabulary and grammar, which essentially means words, patterns, and structures, sounds, words, patterns, are all very obviously here, even if the words aren't used. So what you've got in front of you is the Key Stage 2 scheme of work. It doesn't look like how it looks when you download it, but it's got absolutely everything in it. I've just reorganized it so it sits nicely on a slide. It's condensed, but nothing's been left out. So we can identify here the strands of knowledge quite easily. We can see that this is where phonics is. And we can see that this is where vocabulary is. And we can see that this is where grammar is. And, you know, what the National Curriculum Programme of Study does, or its wording, is saying what pupils can do essentially at the end of 4 years study. It's describing what they are able to do, as well as what they do in their lessons every day. It's also a sort of statement of attainment, if you like, at the end. But it doesn't define exactly what. So you can see that phonics or the knowledge of the sound writing relationship is absolutely implied here, because you can only link the sound, spelling and meaning of words if you are practicing the sound writing relationship or practicing phonics. You can only read aloud with accurate pronunciation if you have a firm knowledge of the way letters or combinations of letters sound in the new language, if you can do print to sound. So the way it's framed, though, describes the knowledge's application rather than the knowledge itself. So what we haven't got here is a list of the French or German or Spanish or whatever other language, Italian, sound writing relationships. We don't have the phonics, we don't have the SSCs, the sound symbol correspondences in a list anywhere, and we don't have a sense of a suggested sense of sequencing, or we don't have a suggested sense of whether we should bunch them all up at the start and teach them in a blast and then not really come back to them, or whether we should teach them one by one each week, or how we should do it. There isn't anything about the how, and there isn't the definition of the what. So that's obviously led to many different interpretations, not just in terms of which sound writing relationships to teach or which specific words to teach, but just as crucially, how many words it's reasonable to expect learners to learn. We haven't got that represented in the national curriculum here. How many words is it actually possible if we were teaching 1 hour per week, as Ripple recommends? The Research in Primary Languages white paper recommends a minimum of 1 hour per week. If that were happening, and I know it isn't, but if it were, because that is the sort of stated ideal and the aspiration, how many words would it be reasonable to expect learners to learn and retain over that 4-year Key Stage 2? That is nowhere here. And yet it's stuff that we need to know. Otherwise we are sort of, feeling our way in the dark. We need to get some information about what's reasonable, and then we need to, look at how we do that and how we sequence it over the 4 years. So even with grammar here, adjectives, place, and agreement, all adjectives, all of the irregular ones or just one regular pattern, or 2 regular patterns, or 7 regular patterns. How many regular patterns are there in each of the languages that we might be teaching? So there's a lot linguistically that's missing from this picture. And that's what we sought to add. We added greater definition of the content when we rewrote these schemes of work, and a much clearer sense of what we're starting with, how it's going to proceed in a sequence, and how often we're going to revisit it for retention. And so these are the things that are different and the things that are the same. So in terms of phonics, we have spread phonics out across the whole of the 4 years, with something happening every single week for phonics. We revisit all of the sounds systematically, so that every single one that's introduced is revisited at least once in each of the years, so 4 times, and that's without sort of adding in the assessments or anything like that, just actual teaching weeks allocated. We include unknown words for practice, which is something that previously we hadn't made a particular effort to do, but if you don't, then you aren't really working on the sound writing relationship. You might be just getting them to say words that they already know how to say, and they have retained the pronunciation of that whole word. They're not actually applying the sound writing relationship. So that's been a change. Things that have stayed the same is that we have source words, so keywords that the sound comes in when it's first introduced, and those have gestures. In French, we've used sign language. In Spanish, we've just used the gestures that seemed to be logical. In German, I can't remember what we've done at the moment, but we have definitely kept gestures with the source words, and we have brought in other words around it with the same sound. We practice read aloud and transcription, just like we always have, and we continue to do that in the scheme of work. In terms of vocabulary, we've done, as I suggested we needed to do, we've counted the words. So We have set out what is reasonable to learn, and we've been informed by research to do that. And then we have counted all of the words that we're introducing, and we have been led by frequency to inform that word selection. And we have used the Key Stage 4 content, obviously not all of it, but we have selected from it so that nothing that pupils learn at Key Stage 2, hardly anything that pupils learn at Key Stage 2 does not go with them into Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4. There is almost no wastage. There are a few words that we have introduced deliberately and knowingly because we think they're important at Key Stage 2, but do not then find their way onto a GCSE list, and that's fine. But in the vast majority of cases, and I think for French, it's 92% of words go with them into Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4. All of the words get revisited on a schedule. So after 3 weeks, they revisit the words that were introduced 3 weeks earlier, and after 9 weeks again, and then those words are tested as well. What we have also kept the same is that, as before, we haven't ditched all of our concrete nouns. We still have some pencil case items. We still have some animals. And we have kept activity types. There aren't enough songs in there yet, I know, but we have got some poems and some games and some songs, and we will have more. In terms of grammar, we have made clearer links with primary English. We've made a big attempt to do that. We have included language analysis tasks and explicit explanation. We have included a lot of input practice before pupils are asked to produce, but it's very particular type of input practice. So it's where the thing that they are focusing on has to be processed, has to be thought about, has to be in mind in order to do the task. So it's a very particular way of practicing grammatical features. The features are the same. So in terms of what we're teaching nouns, gender, number, articles, adjectives, some irregular high frequency verbs, and some present tense regular verbs. Though that bit we were teaching before anyway, we're still teaching those things now, but with a lot more knowledge and a lot more tracking, I would say, a lot more just purposeful revisiting of the language. And we're still doing the same sorts of activity types, description tasks, interaction tasks in speaking and in writing. And this is what it looks like in the document. So important to show this as well, I think, because I get a lot of emails saying, this all looks fine, what are the numbers in brackets? So the numbers in brackets are the frequency of those words. And just to explain that this is based on a published frequency list, the Routledge frequency list, which is also the list that's been used for Key Stage 4 GCSE and Key Stage 3 NSAP resources. So when it says Estar 21, it means that in terms of a ranking from 1 most frequent to whatever, infinity, least frequent, the verb estar is the 21st most used word in the Spanish language. And you can see some other very high frequency ones there as well, and a few not so frequent ones. So obviously anything within the most frequent 2000 is extremely frequent. Pupils tend to arrive at primary school with about 5,000 words in their vocabulary. So that gives you an impression that if we're dealing with the most common 2000, that we are still at that beginner level of building knowledge. And obviously very important to have the most frequent because they will be most often used by most people in the country who are speaking the language. So what you can see here, moving left to right, this column contains the sound writing relationship, the phonics that we work on each week. On the right, on the left-hand side, you can see term and week there. Rojo and amarillo, so this is the Spanish one. Red and yellow are year 3, 4, but they can be reversed and taught in any order. And that is because that is essentially because we need to cater. We have a 2-year rolling program to cater for our pupils in mixed classes, but you can teach it sequentially. So you could teach rojo to year 3 and amarillo to year 4. The thing that stays the same is the phonics, which repeats every single year across the 4 years, and the grammar, which stays the same over 2 years. So we have lower key stage 2 grammar and upper key stage 2 grammar, and then we are building the vocabulary. So it means that the grammar gets practiced explicitly in 2 different sets of vocabulary, which again is shown in research to be very strengthening, both for vocabulary knowledge, but also for grammatical knowledge. Let's go on. Grammar repeats in the 2-year cycle, yeah. And these columns here, these white columns, show the vocabulary revisiting schedule. So after words are introduced here in week 1, they will come back for revisiting in week 4. And then here, for example, in week 2, they will then come back. Oh no, that's week 3. Sorry, I was thinking, well, that doesn't add up. But week 3 words and then revisited in week 6. And if you look across one whole row, you will see the words that will be in use that week. So in rojo, you've got elegante, feliz, triste, donde, which are new words being introduced. There's also an indicator here that some different adjectives will, from previous weeks, 2 and 3, for example, will be revisited. But at the same time, you will be going back to the words that were introduced in week 1, which will get a revisit in this week. So it's systematically done that words keep getting revisited as the practice schedule expands and more words get learnt. Words are still revisited all the time. So essentially, and I've just switched languages on you here and gone to French. So the French phonics planning looks like this for all years. So you can see the terms, term 1, term 2, term 3. And in addition, in year 5, 6, in French, additional spellings for the same sound are introduced. So you can see there on on and on om. The on is introduced in year 3, 4 and practiced twice, but then in 5, 6, om is then introduced on as with the same sound, but just building in other spelling variations. Not every single sound is introduced. So in French, we have left certain GCSE sounds out. We've left out th, we've left out ILL, ILLE, and AIL, AILLE, mainly because of frequency. There are not lots and lots of words that have those sounds in our schemes of work, but also about time and about not overcrowding the knowledge. There is time for them to revisit these things later and be introduced to those new ones later. Each sound has a practice week every year, plus assessments. So there are a minimum of 8 intentional encounters at Key Stage 2 of each sound. And phonics activities give us loads of opportunities for incidental learning. So this is where we can use unknown words in songs, in poems, in rhymes, in place names, in people names. And this is just one of the ways in which we can include a rich diet of culture in what we're teaching. Okay, I think I just said that bit. Let's move on. So yeah, let me show you from the beginning. The fully audioed versions of the lesson for French have videos for the in French, so not Spanish but French, have videos for the sound symbol correspondence and the source word. And this helps with the sort of imagining the physiology of pronouncing the new words. Pupils can copy the mouth shape as well as listen to and emulate the pronunciation. So a first introduction. Yeah. And there are non-audioed versions as well, which people can use, so that teachers who do have the confidence and want to be proactive about all stages of the interaction in the lesson, they can just use the non-audioed versions. Yeah. Bien. 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 Okay, and obviously there's a gesture indication underneath the slides. And bien. We go straight on. Bien. with then having the same sound in 4 different cluster words that pupils try and say after
chien,
hearing them.
chien, bientôt, bientôt, ancien, ancien, combien, combien,
And obviously at this stage, once they've all been heard and said, then the teacher can elicit repetition of the sounds, where pupils are then going to remember them in jumbled up order or what have you, just by pointing. But obviously we then need to practice. That's just a presentation phase, and quite often a practice activity will involve unknown words, and often they'll be linked to the theme of the lesson. So it might be that it's a transcription, or it might be listen and match a sound, and it might be based on 2 contrasting sounds which are very similar to each other, quite similar to each other, and pupils have to differentiate them hourly. Now this week's lessons happen to focus on a visit to the zoo, and so animal nouns, which are typically very low frequency, so not a lot of animal nouns will be taken with them into Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4. Dog, cat and horse are the only ones that actually sit with a frequency rating of within the most common 2,000 words. But in a lesson like this, we can make full use of them in phonics activities. We need to include unknown words so that pupils practice and develop their phonics knowledge. And if pupils are very, very animal interested, they will retain these. The piqued interest of the pupils will ensure that they learn some language incidentally that they want to latch onto. And this is all part of opening up the possibility of incidental learning, which we do in a lot of our phonics activities, and giving pupils who do have good memories and who are wanting to learn more words that sort of grab their interest, they will be able to do that here too. So we're at the zoo. For teachers who aren't wanting to say all of the instructions either, we do offer audio for the instructions. But here,
le pingouin,
I just play a couple of these. Pingouin, so they have to decide how the word ends. Is it ia or is it just a? And then obviously we get to see. The computer's being a bit slow.
le félin,
Okay, that's that one again.
le chien,
That's that one again. So again, matching sound to print. But first of all, getting pupils, when you're teaching them a sound writing relationship, getting them to think about it first. What is it that they're hearing? And then obviously giving them instant feedback. I'll just move on from that one. This is just a little bit of culture, because it happened to be that we're focusing on lessons and we're thinking about being in a zoo. This is a kind of thing you might see in a zoo. They do often have I don't even know what this is. Is it an insect? I'm not even sure. But again, everything is audioed. So this is quite an interesting animal that I hadn't seen before. I didn't realize that there were scorpions in France. It seems rather exotic, but in the Languedoc there are, and they're yellow. And so we've got a little bit of a text. It's got some cognates in it. It's got full audio so that pupils can listen and match and read along. They don't know all of these words. Some of them are cognates, some of them are glossed. This is not meant to leave them with language that they take with them. It is introducing some knowledge, that I didn't even have about the country and about the fauna that's there, but also encouraging them to listen and connect the sounds with writing in a sentence or small paragraph setting. It takes a couple of minutes. It raises interest and awareness, of course, as well. This is not what follows straight away. This follows in one of the follow-ups activities. So the way the scheme of work works, you have a 30-minute lesson, And then you have follow-up activities that are dotted through the week, and they make up the other half an hour. So there are 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, and one 10-minute one. The whole of the teaching for the week includes 1 hour's teaching, but the idea was to make it flexible, and also not just flexible for the teachers, but also better practice in terms of what we know about little and often pedagogy, and pupils needing to constantly revisit. And I think that's even more the case in the primary age than it is at secondary, although I think at secondary as well, I'd favour 30 minutes and 5 minutes each day, perhaps not right the way through Key Stage 4 though. But in primary, when I taught it and I was the one-hit wonder that parachuted in for my weekly lesson, it was absolutely amazing. By the end of the 45 minutes, 1 hour session, it would feel like they really knew things. I would come back a week later and they hadn't done any practice in the meantime, or very, very little, but practically none. And a lot of that knowledge would have been eroded. We were constantly sort of moving a little bit forward and going quite a lot backwards. So these 5 minute follow-ups, where they are being done, are giving rise to really, really, really good progress. We're very excited about what's going on, where that's happening, where it's not happening, and it's not happening everywhere. Progress is a little bit slower, obviously. In some of our schools, they are just teaching one 30-minute lesson and not doing any follow-ups. So they then need to teach the follow-ups the following week. So essentially they're making half the progress because they still need to do all of the follow-up activities are not extras. They're very, very important practice. So if you have only got 30 minutes a week and you want to give this a try, don't jump over the follow-ups, do them, but do them in the following week's 30 minutes. Because it's very progressive and all of the practice is really, really important. So in this activity, pupils are having a read aloud. We're still in the zoo, and they pronounce the animal that Eugenie is visiting. So again, we're using unknown words here so that pupils are applying their knowledge of the sound writing relationship. So as you can see, there is a shadow behind each of these text boxes, and when there are shadows on the screen, it means that there's audio embedded. So
le babouin, le scorpion languedocien, le ragondin.
So pupils are going to pronounce them all together. Again, it's nice to work chorally. This isn't a test. This is a learning, a practice activity, and so the teacher clicks to elicit the next one. Pupils are following, pupils are reading aloud, and then they get to listen and click and get instant feedback. Okay, just one type of phonics activity. Obviously, I said it's really great that we can build culture in through phonics work as well. And again, the use of rhyme is very, very powerful. It just sounds so good. I'm gonna play Marie-Odile Guillou reading a poem about La Chandeleur that she has written, and these are on YouTube anyway, but we have embedded some of them at key moments into the scheme of work where they work particularly well. I hope it will play if my internet doesn't fall over.
La Chandeleur. La Chandeleur, que du bonheur avec ma sœur. Beaucoup de beurre pour mon 4 heures, mais sans rancœur. L'hiver se meurt ou prend vigueur, je n'ai pas peur. Plein de couleurs, comme de belles fleurs, près de mon cœur. Marie-Odile Guillou.
Obviously, some of those words are known, a few of them, not all of them by any means, and so they will want some kind of explanation, and we put a rough translation underneath. And certainly the important bit is understanding as well La Chandeleur and what that is. But the sounds of the words are going to get a lovely affective reaction. There is just something very, very nice about hearing all of those sounds at the end of those phrases. You can imagine pupils just wanting to get their mouths around them, and that happens with rhyme a lot, and we like to use it. We're not necessarily, well, we're definitely not wanting to learn all of those words, but it is a question, it's a way of using the phonics practice as a way of getting access to the culture, and also opening up that vocabulary, as I said, for incidental learning. Many other things. Phonics are great ways to include other activities that use unknown words, tongue twisters, poems, small other poems that can, in fact, if we write them specifically, can include just words that they know with a couple of unknown words. So there are lots of ways to do this. And again, to include culture, we have an SSC, which the sound symbol corresponds repaso here, which is using lots of different sounds that pupils have learnt, and giving them a text to read aloud about las Islas Canarias. And here we've got a focus on a visit. Luis is one of our characters, and he's visiting Chile with his family. And we learn a little bit about the other languages that are spoken in Peru. Peru is a focus country for us in the scheme of work, just as Haiti is a focus country for us in the French scheme of work. And obviously exploiting, as everyone will do, songs for inclusion in lessons. This is the one that goes with the Amarillo scheme of work for Christmas. And again, really nice not to just stick with Spain. This is not a European scheme of work. In French, as I said, we have a narrative that takes us from Lorient in France. It takes us to Haiti, and we also have Canada. We also have a link to as well. So there are three sort of main cultural centers for the narratives in our scheme of work. And in the Spanish one, it is Arequipa and Lima in Peru. We have parts of families there from our narrative, and we also have them in Vigo in Spain. But again, lots of us wouldn't necessarily know that what a huayno is, and we wouldn't necessarily know that in Peru, in certain areas of Peru, they call the baby Jesus Niño Manuelito. And why that might be. I did know that, but I hadn't really made the connection with Manuelito, Manuel, Emmanuel, which is another name for Jesus in the Bible. So, lots of nice things here, and the opportunity to hear different voices. So here, this is I'll just play you a little bit of this and see if you want to join in.
Niño Manuelito, ¿qué quieres comer? Niño Manuelito, ¿qué quieres comer? Torrejitas fritas envueltas en miel, torrejitas fritas envueltas en miel. Mi canchita te la traigo molidita, te la traigo aquí, te traigo el buen café para María y San José. Aquí te traigo el buen café para María y San José. Yo como pastora te traigo mis ovejas. Yo como pastora traigo mis ovejas. Unas trasquiladas y otras sin orejas. Unas trasquiladas y otras sin orejas. Mi canchita te la traigo molidita, te la traigo aquí, te traigo el buen café para María y San José. Aquí te traigo el buen café para María y San José.
Short enough to learn, cultural enough to bring up some interesting discussion, of an unusual Christmas song, because it's from a completely different tradition, from a different people, and obviously important that we realize that Peru isn't just one people either. It's got all many different traditions within it, so we don't want to stereotype Peru either, but absolutely lovely to include different examples of songs from where the language is spoken. And a quick, I'm sure you saw it, but a link here, mamalista.com. I'm sure everybody knows that is a wonderful treasure treasure trove of songs. Now, vocabulary then. So far phonics, but vocabulary, we want to think about how many words. So doing the maths, that's important. Choosing the words, that's important. Planning in the revisiting, as we saw in the scheme of work, that's important. And that's all quite different, I would suggest, from what's kind of been going on in the writing of primary curricula and in the writing of secondary language curricula up to this point. But there are many things that can stay the same. So activity types that have worked for us as teachers, whether we're teaching primary or secondary language, they don't need to be ditched. The ways of learning vocabulary, if it's effective now, it'll be effective with new, slightly more frequent vocabulary that we're revisiting too. So there is no need to throw everything out and think that everything is changing. And I think that's really, really important. It is always worth having a revisit and a sort of look with fresh eyes at what we're doing. But when we find that what we're doing is very effective for learning vocabulary, we should carry on doing that thing. So I think what all that to say that the big change is in the actual content, and where we should think not necessarily in terms of just topic boxes for our vocabulary, sort of, oh, we need to learn all the colours in the same week. The colours are quite frequent, some of them, not all of them. About half of them are quite frequent, but that doesn't necessarily mean we should learn them all together. If they agree differently, if they have different patterns in them, then we shouldn't perhaps learn them all at one time, because that just makes a little bit of a hurdle for pupils to get over if they're going to truly be creative with the language and confidently use it without making mistakes. So we just need to sort of stretch our mindset a little bit about how we organize the words that we teach, but without thinking that this is going to be all change. It really doesn't need to be. So we've got 38 teaching weeks, allow 2 weeks each term for doing project work or extension or assessments in every term, and then allow for an average of 4 new words per hour. And that won't always be 4 new words per week, and that's it. It'll be an average. Sometimes it will need to be 7. Sometimes it can be none at all, because you can be reworking words that they have learned previously. It just really depends, but it gives you an average, and trying to stick with an average is important. If you stick with 4 new words learnt on average per hour for all of those weeks, you will get to around 512 words. And actually, believe me, it sounds a huge number of words, but it's actually very difficult to stick to only those. So I very much suspect that there are a lot more words going on in many curricula. But we nevertheless want to restrict it, because we know that we want to really work with the words that we have, so that we can be passing pupils on with good transitional knowledge, and that secondaries will welcome that with open arms. We want to get to this point where we are contingent one on the other, the 2 phases. We are part of the same journey. That's the ideal, that's the goal, that's the dream. But I think it can get closer. I think we can get far closer than we are right now. So yes, we said we would still have classroom items. Why? Because they're so important to age 7-8 learners that are learning about gender for the first time, that are learning about what nouns do for the first time in a new language. We want them to be able to pick up their stylo. We want them to be able to connect viscerally with some of the things around them. And there'll be very much things that they'll want to mention and say, oh, mon stylo, c'est ici, or whatever. You know, it's obvious and logical that at this age, some kind of concrete nouns are important and useful and helpful in the classroom. I think that's probably a given. Numbers, days, months, of course, they're all common, they're all useful. Let's teach them now. So in terms of how many of the words would we teach on the scheme of work are part of the most common 2000, well, nearly 80%. And you can compare that if you know about the new GCSE developments. You'll know that 85% of the new GCSE list words have to be taken from the most common 2000. So we've gone for a near 80. In Spanish and German, it's met 80, but in the French, it's just 2% down. That's very few words. So I'm calling that full employment. I'm calling that job done. We are where we are, around about 80%. And yet, what's really important and even more interesting is that the overlap between this word list and the GCSE list, and we only had one GCSE list to go on, so we went on the NSELP, which has been adopted by Educast GCSE list. The overlap is 92%, and that means that of the 4 years of Key Stage 2, you're only teaching, I think it's 41 words that they're not going to take with them into, so that's 41 out of 500 that they're not going to take with them into Key Stage 3. And each one of those has been really carefully chosen because it fits very much with the Key Stage 2 curriculum that we want and that we were creating. So we haven't done that lightly, and we have done it with careful planning, but I think it's a pretty good carryover, a pretty good transitional curriculum from Key Stage 2 to Key Stage 3. And it's the same in the other languages. And obviously we've talked about the revisiting that happens every single week. So all this to say, this list of how you teach vocabulary, how you may teach vocabulary with gestures, with rhymes, with listen and respond to me, listen and respond to the recording, read and respond, conversation, sock puppets, apps, writing in the air, writing on your sleeve, writing on the table, writing on mini whiteboards, all of those should be there and should be happening in exactly the same way. That should be reassuring that even if the sort of content parameters, if you like, are shifting a little bit, that there's a lot of elements of continuity in here as well. Couple of, just so we don't leave German out of the picture, and I do want to signpost you to Rowena Kasprowicz's Progression in Primary Languages project, which is not just a German project, it's French and Spanish as well. So do visit the website and read about it. It's gonna be a very, very important project. Obviously it'll be some time before we see data and results from it. It's underway at the moment, but really exciting, and I'm sure you can get on the mailing list so that you can be involved in hearing about it. Maybe she's still looking for project schools, so if you're teaching languages and you're just interested to see whether you might be a project school as well, particularly if you're teaching German, I know we're still looking for project schools for German, so do get in touch with her via the website. It's going to be an amazing project. But things like this, so treasure hunts, producing sentences, we're practicing grammar and vocabulary here, we're practicing with speaking, it's a game scenario. The meaningfulness in this is that we're actually trying to see what's underneath the square, so we're motivated to say something here. So das ist ein Hund, it's a masculine word and it's after ist, so we know it's just going to be ein. That gets us 2 coins, not a great thing. Somebody might then be encouraged to put their hand up and say, oh, das ist eine Freundin, but they don't get anything at all. Someone then might decide to see what's down here. Du hast einen Hund. Ah, that gets you a jewel. That kind of thing. Lots of games, still practicing vocabulary. This is a writing comes speaking, starts off as writing, becomes a speaking activity. And they use rock, paper, scissors to decide whose sentence is essentially winning, and then they have to make the negative as well because that's what they've been practicing. So lots and lots of interactive speaking activities. If audio is needed, audio will be embedded. I hadn't quite been embedded into that last one, that's why the shadow was there, but nothing happened because it's a new resource, that one. But information gaps, perfectly possible at Key Stage 2. Who are you? You have to choose to be somebody. Are you going to be Micah? In which case you'll get asked questions like, hast du ein Lied? Hast du Wasser? Hast du eine Blume? Hast du einen Hund? And eventually you'll say something which will give your identity away, and someone will say, ah, bist du? And then you will admit to it or not. So really practicing interactions as well in engaging scenarios, imaginative scenarios. This one is when we've been practicing sentences in German. All of these indicate sentences that pupils will be familiar with, but haven't I haven't obviously had maximum amount of practice. There are 9 possibilities on here. They have to choose 3 of them. They have to write 3 sentences without showing their partner. And then we cover them all up. They talk to each other and they have to draw what the other one is saying. And then they check to see how right they were. Lots and lots of activities, which may seem quite advanced potentially, but it's been step by step. So by the time they're doing that one, they have been learning German for 3 years, and all of that stuff has been practiced before. We've got knowledge organizers, of course, 1 per half term. I put out a very strong plea to the primary network that they actually used these at the end of the half term, once all the teaching had been done, because I said, look, it looks quite overwhelming if you hand this out to pupils at the beginning and say, look, this is our journey, this is where we're going. But I have increasingly had teachers make compelling cases, and they're obviously using them at the moment for using them a bit earlier in the teaching. And they say that pupils do like using them to test each other, and they do like colouring over them to show which words that they really, really know. So yeah, with some caveats, they weren't meant to be handed out at the outset. They're not meant to be sitting on the table visible at all times, because then we don't get it. We get too much support and not enough work on memory, which is really important. And that's what all the repetition is for, is to make it not so important to be constantly looking at a prompt. But you can see anyway from the knowledge organisers that culture plays a big part. We have a whole week about Le Carnaval du Montant, which is an amazing fruit festival in the south of France near Nice, which is a fantastic thing to have in a February. That would really, really lighten up my life if I could go there in February. I think we should all go, we should have a trip. And things, a bit more about customs for starting the new year. Just really a building up, a gradual build up of useful and interesting information about places where the people speak French. And I said that we have characters, and I think this bit is really, really important, because if you're going to take away a real focus on, right, this week's about colours, this week's about pets, this week's about family only, then having a story to hang all of your content on is really important. And teachers are really saying that how useful this is. It gives continuity from week to week. It gives familiarity. It means that you can join language up even when you haven't got that obvious sort of overriding, very, very familiar, oh, it's sports this week topic. They're a cultural springboard as well, because we have our characters based in different countries, and they give us stories within stories. So teachers have told us how important it is that we have lots of elements that repeat for familiarity. So we have the characters that repeat, and we also have some activity types that repeat as well. And from my perspective, I sometimes think, gosh, is this getting too repetitive? But then I check with teachers and they say that this really helps maximize the learning time, because learners recognize quickly what they have to do. They don't need any explanation. They can just get straight on with it. And that really sort of builds this self-efficacy. I absolutely love the characters. It means that you have this thread that runs across all sorts of everyday situations. So they can be in class, they can be at home, they can be visiting family, they can be going on an excursion to see a cultural event. And the background narrative provided by them is like the contextual thematic backbone of the course. And it also allows you to be a bit playful and include stories within stories. You can have, in the French scheme, for example, Pierre has a dream, which he then develops into a storybook for the younger sister of one of his friends. In Spanish, Sophia has a bizarre dream involving a cow and a horse while she's on a farm visiting her grandmother. And we've had really good feedback on those lessons. They sound a bit quirky, but the imaginary context and the humour seems to sort of encourage their risk taking as well. So yeah, I'm a big fan of creating a narrative context. And I just wanted to give you one example. I'm going to open up to questions really quite soon, or comments. I haven't been keeping an eye on the chat because I'm too engaged in all of this, but I want to pause and have a moment for doing that in a minute and just allow and open it up for questions. But I wanted to give a full week's example of an upper Key Stage 2 course. So this could be either year 6 or year 5. It wouldn't matter which one because the grammar is the same. So they would be taught in different orders. But it's really, really hard to select 1 week's lessons and to try and show everything, because everything builds up. And I have this fear that by showing you this one, you'll say, it's way too complex or something. But you've got to think that this is after 3. This is in the 3rd term anyway, or the 2nd term, I can't remember which one, of the 3rd year of learning the language. And the 2 years that have come before it have been based on an hour's worth of teaching each week. So, you know, it's aspirational for some schools where they haven't had that time, but only where they haven't had that time. It's nothing about teacher expertise. It's everything about planning. It's everything about gradual build-up. It's everything about supportive resources. It's everything about teacher CPD to give confidence to deliver those resources. But you do not have to be a language expert. You do not have to have Spanish knowledge initially to teach these resources. You will need some CPD without a shadow of a doubt, but not loads and loads and loads. And we do have teachers who have picked this up from the internet without any CPD. And have run with it, but we've also had teachers that have done that who've told us they've given up. So it is better with CPD, but I just want to give you a flavour, because this I particularly enjoyed this one, and we can see, I hope we can see phonics, vocabulary, grammar, culture, creativity, and communication in here. Let's see if we can. And I want to just stress that whilst pupils, what they're experiencing is this topic level. They are experiencing a crazy festival that children of their age actually participate in Spain. It really happens. And they're becoming more confident and competent in understanding and producing sentences in the present tense. Because this is the 3rd time that they've worked with they forms of regular verbs, AR verbs this year. They've already spent weeks of plural forms of irregular verbs with ser, tener, and estar. And there are going to be 2 more opportunities after this one in the same year to do exactly the same thing, but in different contexts. So they will have, at the end of Key Stage 2, they will have had 10 weeks of practicing they forms of present tense verbs in different thematic contexts and with different vocabulary. So that's the level of repetition that there is. And that does build confidence, and it does build proficiency, and that real sense of success. So essentially in 3 and 4, we build singular verb knowledge, and we revisit it in 5 and 6, and then add plural forms to those. And obviously with not to all verbs, we don't do IR verbs in Spanish, we do ER verbs and AR verbs. In French, we just do ER verbs, and obviously avoir, être, aller, and one more, faire, of course. So again, led by the National Curriculum Programme Study. So over the 4 years, they will have actually had 25 weeks of practice at these verb forms. So not the plurals, but 25 weeks of the singular verb forms that I was just listing there. And that sort of systematic revisiting applies to all of the grammar. It's not just the verbs, obviously. So in case you think there isn't creativity in this one, I have put an extra creative bit at the end if we have time, because there just isn't time to show absolutely everything. But let's see what we've got in this lesson. So this is to set the scene for the lesson, La Tomatina Festival, and there is the La Tomatina Kids as well, as we're going to see in a minute. We're going to practice some previously taught vocabulary. So this is a recapping activity. And then we've got 4 new words for this week, which we've also put into this preemptive activity. So this revises words that they know. You can see I have glossed the one word that they don't know. So, you know, we've built up quite a lot of vocabulary. You know, I've been reviewing some GCSE sample materials that have just come out. I'm sure some of you have seen them. If you teach secondary, you'll have seen them. They've been published, French sample assessment materials for the new GCSE, and this text wouldn't be that out of place. But they know all of these words. These are all words that we have taught and built up over the scheme of work so far, except for calle, which comes in the verde. So they haven't done that one yet when they're doing azul. So they have to read the text out loud. They have to work out what the meanings of these words are. There are 4 new words in here, and all the others are revisited words. So obviously there's some work to be done, but they are up to the task. You can click and hear an audio version of the text if you want to. We move on from that. This is all about the same festival. So we now have a map of Buñol, which is where this festival takes place, and we're going to practice pronouncing las calles. So here it's about pronouncing the stress and putting the stress on the syllable where the accent, where the tilde is. So again, pupils will practice pronouncing in pairs. We'll click this and give them some time to do it. They will be saying to each other, calle Colón, calle Reyes Católicos, putting the stress on the syllable that is marked for them. And obviously it's marked in a different color as well, just to give them a bit of extra support. We use timers quite a lot. We highlight the different places, and these are places that really exist as well. These are all of the names of the streets around La Tomatina. So we're building a picture of a place that we hope they will pester their parents to go to, although I don't know, maybe not. I've never been to La Tomatina, but I do want to go. It is on my bucket list. We're going to revisit with some explicit explanation. This is a revisit, but with different vocabulary. So they've met all of this before. This is not for writing down. We're not in the business of writing down our grammar explanations, because they, in and of themselves, are not anything. They are at best a sort of booster, a way to raise awareness that will then be practiced in the actual activity. And it's the practice that follows that's really important. But this first stage is important too. This is a leveling the playing field. This is a heightening the awareness of every child and just drawing their attention to the fact that this is what we're focusing on for the next few minutes of our practice. So we've got tira tomates, which is he or she throws tomatoes. We've got tiran tomates, which is they throw tomatoes. Again, it's all themes to go with, obviously, our theme of this week. And then we've got corre por las calles, something else we're going to be doing in this lesson, and corren por las calles. So we're raising the awareness here. We're getting that pattern, because here comes our contrast. Is it he or she, or is it they? That's what we're going to be practicing now in reading, and then we're going to practice it in listening. So our context, this is Sofia and Quique. They live in Vigo. They are of Peruvian origin, but they currently live in Spain, where they're both growing up. And La Tomatina Infantil is somewhere that they're going, and there's a little bit of information about it. So is it they doing this together, or is it she doing it, Sofia, doing it herself? Now, of course, the only way to know this, to answer this question, is to focus on the verb. We've got no names here, and Spanish doesn't use pronouns. It uses verb endings anyway. But if this activity were in French, we would have covered up the pronouns, because we are focusing pupils in on the hard to reach bit. We all know that English, we're led by pronouns. We only have one verb ending that conjugates with our verbs. So everything is about pronouns for us. Therefore, we are blind to verb conjugations in other languages, and we need our attention directing. It needs to be task essential for us to really get that knowledge practiced and to get that embedded and to get us thinking about it. So here we have están, and pupils of all abilities can do this bit. This is a simple contrast. This is about focusing in on what's the same and what's different. So están embuñol para la tomatina is going to be they. Lee las instrucciones is going to be she. Oh, I'm realizing now that we're running out of time for questions. There's also a listening to practice this as well, with different verbs. Again, the only thing that needs glossing on here is tiene lugar, which is in the context, and goggles, gafas de natación, which they haven't learned. But all the other words that you're seeing are all words that they have learned before. Again, we practice this in listening as well, to make sure that we can hear and listen out for, is it plural or is it singular? Again, we're obviously still understanding the language because communication is all important. We need to get the messages as well. We move on into writing and put those sentences in writing, and I'm really rushing now. And obviously the speaking in the same way is an information gap where pupils will get the answer because they are listening to what their partner has said, and they have to distinguish between the things that we're focusing on, which is either plural or singular. Is it she or they? Is it she or they the whole time? So they are each other's input at this point, and they swap rounds, obviously. Now, it's probably going to go into all sorts of other bits and bobs now, but grammar, I hope you can see from that lesson that we've just had that we do quite a lot of explicit work to level the playing field. Then we do a lot of input practice, and then we do a lot of practice in production, which also focuses on the same thing. It's about that sort of continual plugging, but at the same time, what are pupils experiencing? They're experiencing a really, really fun lesson, a really interesting lesson about La Tomatina. I've included some references there about this leveling the playing field of teaching explicit grammar. And there's lots more references here that obviously we haven't got time for. But at this point, I wanted to get to the point for questions. And I realized that I've got about 3 minutes, which is not very long at all. Are there any questions? There are links on this slide to the schemes of work, if anybody is interested to follow those up and find them. Please do. Any questions that people would like to raise? Oh, I won't show you that bit about the poems. That's the other sort of really, really fun bits on poetry writing. But I've got 2 final slides at the end. These are the sorts of courses, when I said there is CPD, these are the sorts of courses we're running. At the moment, we've started this one, it's already underway. There are 30 on the French, 32, I think, on the French course, around 15 on the Spanish one, but it's already started. If you are interested in a 3-session introductory course, there could be further cohorts. That's really up to, if there's a need there. There does seem to be a need at the moment, but you can email me through the website to let me know about that. There's also many ways to stay in touch. Tweet me or email me through the website, or leave me some feedback. And on the earlier one, I left you with the instruction to put your name in. This is a 1-question survey that you could do. I know that someone's going to encourage me in the chat in a second to put the slides, to put the link to the slides, which I will need to do. I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see if there are any questions in the chat, and I'm also going to paste. Oh, come on, Rachel. All you need to do is paste the presentation link to the slides in case that's of interest to people. I will just put that in the chat quickly now. Link to the slides, thank you. And also for the GCSE seminar, and I even got that prepared as well in case you were here and wanted that. So that's the link to the primary slides. This is the link to the GCSE slides that I did earlier. Yes, that's fine. The links there for the GCSE slides as well. Oh, you're from Vigo. How lovely. Yes, Paula chose Vigo. I've not been there yet. And yes, Mario Diaz's voice is beautiful, isn't it? Really lovely to listen to. And so helpful to have those videos for the mouth shape. I think that's really, really important. Where is the link? You can't see it in the chat. Oh, I have just put it. Hold on. I can put it in again. A link to this presentation. You should be able to see it in the chat, but I will just put it in again there. Oh, it does say to hosts and panelists. That's not very useful, is it? To everyone. Perhaps I didn't do it to everyone. There we go. Everyone, that's the one from the session. This one is the GCSE one from earlier. Okay, good, that's gone now. Thank you, everybody. Obviously, I know you've probably got sessions to go to now. If anyone has got any questions, I'll hang on for a couple of minutes. I'm very happy to answer questions. Oh, you're from Peru. I love Peru. I've also, you know, it is amazing though that when you start working with places that you've never been, you really want to go there. But when you start working with in your materials with places that you have been before and you already have a love of, you just love them even more. So now my list of places to go and see is just absolutely, well, not to go and see, but to go and spend time is absolutely huge. I've got a long list of places in Peru that I haven't been to yet. I have very much made Arequipa my second home, but I need to go and explore the rest of the country in time. So yeah, don't know where you're from, Fanita, in Peru, but I absolutely love it. And yes, and it goes without saying, of course, that any of the resources can just be, you know, take things out, take out Mario D's beautiful phonics videos, use those in your course if you want to, if you think they'll be useful to you. The bits and pieces can be broken up, of course. It's all out there for adaptation. The whole point is to share. So I don't know if anyone is as excited by as I am by reposting a link to the slides. Yes, I can. If people are excited by the prospects of primary, I know I'm probably opening a can of worms because you'll tell me all of the woe stories. Oh, Cajamarca. I've heard of Cajamarca. I will go there. I will definitely go. There's the slide link. Yeah. No, you're very welcome. The whole team. It's a very. I'm taking your thanks on behalf of the team because we're a small little crew, but completely taken by this project and very much enjoying it, very committed to it. So yeah, Paula and Mario Dil and Catherine, it's good. It's good. I won't be sad when I finish making the last PowerPoint though. It's quite labor intensive, but I don't think I'm going to make another one. I think this is the one. This is the one that I'm going to leave people with and then say, right, website closed, it's done. Time to go and live in Peru, as I keep saying. That is my dream. So yeah, really lovely to share this afternoon with you. Hope you have great rests of your day. Yeah. Anyway, my ability to make sense will soon desert me. But thank you. Thanks for your company. And if you have any recommendations of sessions that you've been to over the last couple of days that I could get on catch up, that would be good, because I haven't, I've been really busy and I haven't actually managed to to access any other sessions yet, but I know that there are some really good ones. But if you've got recommendations of ones you think I will enjoy, please post those for me. That'd be great. I probably should close this session actually, because we're still recording, and people that watch this on catch up, mind you, they'll get to this bit and they'll know that it's kind of over. So yeah, I won't worry too much about them. And do drop me a line if you want to be on the receiving end of just, and I don't know, I guess it's an email every half term, just updating on what's changed, what's new, what's up there. You won't get lots of spam. It'll just be a way of keeping in touch with the whole project. So yeah, let me know. Really nice to see you all. There are some familiar names here, but also some brand new names and people that I have never been in touch with. Yeah, Glynis, how are you? Hope you're well. Just skimming through now to see other names of people that I know. There are other familiar names, but then you don't know whether just you've come into contact with them through the website or just through email. Retired. Yeah, I'm aspiring to that, Glynis. Are you enjoying? Have you traveled? I have such a long list of things I want to do. It just yeah, retirement beckons. Perhaps not quite as soon as I would like, but I can dream. I can definitely dream. Right, I am all over. Oh, Australia, New Zealand, and Europe. Oh, you know, this is making me envious now. We'll have to stop this recording, otherwise I'll ask you more and more details. No, don't be sorry. I'm very, very, I think it's brilliant. And my time will come. I'm looking forward to it. I'm making plans for it. And that's, yeah, no, it's good. I'm so glad. And New Zealand is really beautiful, isn't it? Right, I'll close it now. Thank you. Thanks very much, everyone. It's been really great to get excited about primary. It doesn't take me much to get excited about primary languages, it has to be said. That's really good. Right. Have a very good weekends, all of you, and I'm sure we'll be in touch again at some point. Bye for now.